Lightning like Steve McQueen. I'm in the fast lane when the light turns green. And I built tough, I ain't nothing but grit. Cause I made rugged blood, sweat, and spit. Yeah, like a horse I fly. Better push yourself in for a bumpy ride. I like to play hard, but I work harder. And I weather the storm cause I'm built stronger.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live from the TIA conference here in Phoenix, Arizona on this beautiful April day out here. And I am joined by my man, Matt, here with Green Screens. We're going to talk about data. We're going to talk, what does this data actually mean? Because I think in transportation, people see a rate and they think it's the end all be all. And then they think that it's always going to be that way. And then things are never going to change. So how do you actually break this data down? How can you apply it out there into the market? And most importantly, how can you retain more carriers? And how can you earn more business from your customers out there? So Matt, thank you so much for joining me. And if you could give yourself a little introduction for anybody who might not know who you are.
Yeah, great. Yeah, Matt Harding, CTO with Green Screens. We have about 160, 170 brokers that we serve with what I would call continuous real-time machine learning to help with pricing. So I oversee the technical development and all the technology, the machine learning teams to bring that to the market. So
yeah, and I'm one of those brokers who use your guys' software all the time. And, you know, because it's like, I think like the best part about where things are from a pricing standpoint is I remember back in the day, it was call that one guy and use that rate that they give you and bid on that. And now it's evolved into like, it's a literal science now. And what I like the most about it is because for me, it's about predicting where things are going, right? Because I think it's very easy to sit in the reactive spot market mentality of I'll just wait to find a truck until the load comes about. But what people don't realize is there's a lot more patterns out there and there's a lot more stability than I think most people even think about, because, you know, the reality is when you're building your book of business, when you're building your brokers, whatever that looks like, your freight isn't consistent. Like, right. I think the biggest fallacy out there is you'll just find freight and you'll be able to work it every day.
Yeah.
Like it takes a long time to do that, but you need information. If you don't have the experience, if you've got into this industry where you've never done this job before, you need a place to go to be able to see like, what is a trend line? Where has it, like, what is a historical thing? Where are things going to go? Because it's easy to sit in the reactive mindset of the spot market and then just stay there. And then you wonder why you can't get any traction.
Right. Well, obviously brokerage is dealing a lot with unplanned, unpredictable demand. That's kind of the nature of the business. But there are cases where there is predictability and there's stability. And so I think through the market cycles, if we look at rates peaking like they did over COVID, if you look at where they are now and where they have been for the last year, those are two different environments. And that has implications in terms of your commitment to your customers for those contracted loads. I think it also has implications in terms of how you manage sort of the front lines and the floor of how loads are being covered. So one of the things that we see happening with our business, one of the aspects to that drives our product development, is the need for controls. So if you have real-time machine learning, if you have the ability to predict certain customers, certain lanes within your business, compare that to the overall market to help with that buy-side decision-making, then the next logical step is to understand where those margins are subject to those trends. So one, you have consistency in your relationships. There's a sense of riding the market in an acceptable way, and then growing the volume of your business so that you can get the margins aligned and optimized so that your win ratio is creating the most value for your business. At the same time, you know, all the business intelligence, all the analytics to go on top of that. So we're super excited at the products that we're launching because it's taking that sort of pricing intelligence and bringing it up a level so that pricing managers and organizations can build their business around that information.
Yeah. I get a lot of shit when I say this, but there's a lot more consistency out there than people think, right? Because when you're in a reactive environment, trying to build your book of business, what people, I think what a lot of people overlook on is the consistency of the trend lines that are going on when you're trying to build up a book of business. Because, you know, moving Los Angeles to Phoenix on a dry van might spike throughout the week, but if you're moving it consistently you might move it once a week. It might be on a Tuesday one day, a Wednesday the next week, and a Thursday the next week. But you're waiting in the moment. What you're not realizing is it might be a little bit different on a price, but it's a lot more consistent to what you're paying your carriers out there. And then most importantly, what you're going to be able to deliver to your customers, because that's what you need to find when you're building up a book of business. Customers and carriers want the same thing. They want consistency and consistency in their price and everything else. But I think a lot of people get that pricing anxiety that comes in when you're like, oh shoot, what do I quote? What do I do in this situation?
Right.
And, because fortunately I've messed all of this up numerous times throughout my career. But what I started to realize is if you actually look at things on a lane by lane basis throughout time, yes, there are going to be spikes out there, but you need to remove them from your actual pricing decision moving forward. Because what was it? Was it a holiday weekend? Was there a weather event? What was going there? So you don't need to take that data and then you're pricing yourself out of freight from that perspective.
Yeah, I think the key is just having stable relationships with your customers. They're going to call for help when they need it, and you might have to jump through hoops to make that happen. And that's fair value in my sense of business. So I think the broker coming to save the day, hey, I got a guy 300 miles away, we can get you covered. That's a great story. And so those types of pricing variations I think are natural.
Yeah.
I think the bigger thing is when you're talking about like LA and Phoenix and some of these markets that have consistent flows, lifeline flows like Atlanta to Florida, things, there's just areas where there's just consistency. There's a lot of life on the other end of those lanes that needs to be supported. You think about all of the analysts and the individuals that are trying to price that information. Well, they're not static. They come and go. They go to one business, they come from another. They may have different processes that they've learned, and they all think they kind of understand certain markets and certain rates. But we know from those trend lines and from the information that one, they are volatile in their own right. They don't stay still. And then there are those cases where you have a certain customer with different requirements than another that makes that pricing different. So you can't really look at it as an average type of scenario. What you're trying to do is refine the capacity, the solution to that customer in a way that's has a long-term benefit.
Yeah.
And there's just cases where you can lose business or be perceived one way or another. But if you have that pricing intelligence, you're able to share that knowledge and that baseline. We're seeing more and more of our broker customers saying, we'd like our shippers to understand what we're learning from you to help with that relationship. So there's some initial trends I see that are happening with the data that we're getting. And some of that data is still in the minds of individuals, but when it comes to pricing and what machine learning can do to sort of encapsulate that organizational knowledge, it's really moving fast.
I think that I want to step this way just a little bit. We're just otherwise I'm going to gravitate towards you.
Okay, that's all right.
So that's the beauty of showing people the reality when you're doing stuff out there. Man, is this
I have a day job?
I know nothing's perfect. Nothing's perfect. But I look at a lot of it like this because you brought up, it's easy to talk about the power lanes, right? Like the Los Angeles to Phoenix is the Atlanta to Chicago's, but the reality is when you're getting that first shot with a customer, it's going to be Reno, Oklahoma to, Bismarck, North Dakota and stuff like that. So it's like, how do you take this data and like, what would you recommend to somebody? Because like what I do in these instances is I utilize green screens. I see what is it looking like out there. And then if it's a new lane, I'm old school, so I pick up the phone and I start calling carriers, right? I'm like, hey, what are you guys looking for? And because I use that baseline average for my sell rate, is I'm like, hey, this is what it's looking like out there. Does that work for you? And then you get a very fast response on absolutely not, or send it right over, right? And then you can use that confidence because I think a lot of people rely on what data is out there and they say that is what it's going to pay. And then when they actually start to work the load, they realize this is way off. And then they come to you guys and they're like, your guys' rates are off. And it's like, well, hold on a second. And this is just coming from my perspective as a user of green screens and as a broker who actually moves freight. It's a reference point for me because if it's a new lane, you need to pick up the phone. You need to talk to the drivers who are actually moving this freight all the time to make a better decision that's off of that.
Well, we're very transparent about our accuracy. So every customer knows their MAPE, which is their mean average percent error, and a little technical term there. But on an average, we're sub 10%, which means for probably 3/4 of the data for any one customer is like single digit accuracy. So there are going to be low ends on the tail. There's going to be a freak storm somewhere. There'll be something that happens. The carrier will say no. But the element of all of that is that if you have a system that's producing accurate information that's more accurate than anything else out there, then it saves time. And time is money. If you don't respond to the shipper quick enough, if you're spending too much time trying to negotiate out in the market, if you want a couple hits and they're all on the line and you feel confident, then you can get that load booked and move on. So
and that's what I think is just so important about all of this stuff, because I get probably 15 DMs a week minimum of how do I bid freight? What do I do? What do I do in these instances? And I tell people all the time, like, the tribal knowledge is imperative. You need to bring it, because I've moved loads before in my career where you could look at any data point out there and it's going to say you're going to pay $3,000. And then you pick up the phone and everybody's at 38, 39, 39, whatever that looks like. So it's like, I want people to understand that you need to use data, but you can't take it as like, this is what it's going to be, because it gives you that, then you go and quote that load and then you're off and then you fail on a load and then you're out of a customer that quick. So it's like, there's a process that comes along with this, because yes, there's a lot of accuracy in your guys' data and every data out there. But like you brought up, like there is that percentage that's going to happen. So for me, it's like, if you're going to teach best practices to people, like I try and bring up all the time, is it's like, yes, utilize this, but go out there and work that load. Like if you bid it and you don't win it, go out there and work that load in a different angle, because again, there's a lot more consistency than people, I think, even realize.
Yeah. There's the two things. This is like textbook education, university stuff, but you have the accuracy, which is how centered you shoot something at the target. And then, or, is it in the middle of the target? And then the precision is how tight those shots are. Yeah. So the thing is to realize that you can increase your precision and your accuracy and you tighten that zone, but there's still transportation is very anomalous. I mean, we know that. And part of the reason is most of the systems out there, most of the TMSs are designed for order to cash. So all of the necessary information to move a load through different statuses, to get appointments booked, all those types of activities are centered more around the financial flow of that information. What we're trying to do is add data into the equation so that we can see win ratio. So we can see other things based on the quoting activity that maybe weren't available before, because part of trucking is most of the information that's not in TMS is in the individual doing it. And that's why they sort of look at these trends and say, well, that doesn't apply to my business, or I'm doing this, or my day's complicated. It's really because all the information is part of that individual's experience is not codified anywhere. So as we start evolving into solutions that are yielding more margin for our customers, it's really requiring us to pull other data sources in to sort of advance that opportunity.
So how do you work with somebody who comes to you like that, right? Where they're like, this doesn't fit for my business because I've been doing it for 30 years or 15 years and that's not going to work on this.
Well, the question is, when are you retiring? Because once you're gone, that doesn't help the organization and the people around you. You want to institutionalize your pricing knowledge in a company. And if you can digitize it in a way that's meaningful and useful and accurate, then the organization becomes more successful. Because you're not relying on a couple really smart people who want to go start their own brokerage someday, or they retire, or or they're super competitive and don't want to share the knowledge with the new hires and things like that. So
I think that one of the biggest, because like this is just what I've gone through and what I've missed and what I see the value in when you're building up a business or anything is it's building that system, right? Building a system around how do you quote, getting rates back to people, because I mean in the world that I operate in open deck and heavy haul, a lot of our customers are project-based customers, right? So they just need to see a rate to get back to their sales staff to get it out there, and that speed that comes around it. But again, what factors can you train people on, right? Because again, that's one thing that I say this a lot, and I'll say it again. Like I give my business partner a ton of credit in this, where he's like, "Hey, we need to build a training platform for people to follow," because he comes from the engineering world. So there's a process for a process for a process, right? And that's what we need. So that's what we're bringing out there. Because again, like I hear people say like, "Oh, that's not going to work for this. I've been doing this for X amount of time." It's like, how can you say that it's not going to work from that? You can build it around, and you can build a system for people to follow. Because how are you going to train your new reps who are out there banging the phones every single day to get a quote, and then they finally get a quote, and then you're like, I don't know what to do in these instances.
We've had customers, so we have a user group interactions. The feedback we get from our customers in terms of margin expansion, being able to create incentive-based structures within their teams on top of our platform has been amazing. And it's been so amazing to watch brokers who are traditionally competitive with each other sort of share their approach to that process of getting the most out of their brokerage around that data and getting people incentivized. So there's certain ways to, I think, drive adoption. Some adoption is resisted because of it's like, you want me to do something different? I don't want to do that, right? That's normal. But when you have what I would consider like a community or consortium of brokers that are part of our platform, that are leading the way with their own individual sort of innovations within their businesses and are able to share that with some of our other customers, we're just seeing those types of activities help with the adoption. And lastly, we don't really have to sell a broker on what we do.
For sure.
we've got a very long list of people that sing our praises. So it's very helpful to be effective for these guys, because they're you get 10 times the force impact if you've got an established broker that's negotiating every day, that's growing, hiring and firing, dealing with the shippers in the market, and they say, no, this has been very helpful, and this is why. Here was our journey. So so we've done a very good job on the last few years starting this, and now the momentum's just sort of taken over on a customer side. It's very easy for us to sell.
Yeah, it's, because I've been out there on the road. I've visited a couple of our customers. I'm flying out next week to go visit another one of our customers. And all of them are aware that prices are going to change. All of them are aware rates are going to go up. And one of the great things that I like, shout out to Celine, who's standing over here. She sent over your guys' new charts that you guys are sending out, and they're doing year over year pricing averages. They're doing month over month, and reefer, dry van, flatbed, and all of that stuff in. And every customer that I've talked to, they're aware that rates are going to change. They're just like, what's your guess? When do you think? Because they use you as a broker, as a partner, because they need to forecast too, right? And they need to take this information out there. And I've been saying this for a long time. Like, I think it's not going to be a cataclysmic rise. I think that it's going to be a ratchet up approach. And then I think at some point this year, people are going to look up and be like, damn, rates are 30 cents a mile higher than what they were.
Yeah, I mean, my outlook, I've been looking at data for, since the 2000s. I was with various organizations that had lots of data, the billions.
Billions?
Well, and so the whole point to that is that the business cycles were much different in the past. They were longer, they were a little more subdued. COVID was just a curveball for everyone. I mean, it was just a heyday unlike any other for logistics. And now I think we're at the final. I think COVID's worked its way through, and we're starting to see increased the job numbers are really good in terms of decreased unemployment. The demand is still there. I think the sort of the war chest that you hear about that a lot of the asset providers had coming out of COVID kind of extended the burn in terms of where we are now. So I think Q2 is really the quarter to watch. It's traditionally a very seasonal quarter. It's when the growing season starts. You've got the produce, you've got everything that comes out, people fixing their homes and home improvement, durables and things like that. So Q2 is a strong month. Going into July, I think that will tell us kind of what the rest of the year is going to look like. I see it as a pivotal quarter.
I think, because from my perspective, I think that this year is going to be the first year in probably 4 or 5 years that there's been an actual season of freight. Like you're going to be able to actually predict where things are going. And, because it is, I know, fortunately talked to a lot of brokers, just like you guys talk to a lot of brokers as well. But all of my friends who are doing produce right now, they've all started to say, this market's tight, the rates have gone up here, the rates have gone up there. And I think like that's always the biggest sign for me, because it's like the produce season is the kickoff of freight volumes for the year historically, right? And I think that if people, because like this is how it works. You got produce season, and then it'll dip for a little bit. It'll spike back up around Memorial Day, whatever one comes first. Memorial Day, dip back down, July 4th, spike up, and it'll ride that wave out there, and then it'll pick up around mid-August, and it'll stay there through the holiday freight season. And then it dips off right before Christmas. And then that's how it typically, that's how a freight market will go. So for anybody out there who's never seen that before, that's the wave of it.
Yeah, and the point is, if we don't see that, it's going to be another year, right? So we should expect to see that, and if we don't, that's information as well. And if it's if it's more extreme, that's a data point as well. That tells us that probably the supply is contracted a little bit more, or maybe way more than necessary. So having that understanding of seasonality. I used to create heat charts in Tableau. There's a ton of them out there online, but you could time lapse the rate inflation, and you could see the growing season. It was like all the way from San Joaquin down to Florida, and the rates had a premium. And as you get into like September, October, you'd see the Christmas tree harvest, the pumpkin harvest, up in North Dakota and those markets. And it would just literally ratchet up the latitudes, and it was really kind of interesting. But we haven't seen years like that since 2019.
And it's, because that's the thing is like when people hear produce, they're like, oh, it just affects reefer. And I'm like, it doesn't just affect reefer freight.
No, because the drivers go for it.
No, it does that, but it also affects dry van a lot more than people think, because all the freight that could go van or reefer now just strictly has to go on van, because all the reefer capacity is bought up. So that naturally brings up the dry van market to kind of come along with that. And that's a major oversight, I think, from a lot of people, where they think like, oh, it's just reefer, I'm just going to follow that. But no, you can follow that. I guarantee, and this would be cool if you guys aren't working on it, or maybe if you are, do the dry van trend line to go hand for hand with that in those freight markets. And I guarantee you can see that there's going to be an increase in pricing on that.
Yeah. One of the cool things about those charts, and I get this a lot, so that people say, why don't you put like a cost per mile up there? And the cost per mile is great if you've got everybody in that bucket. But if I take a broker out and say, well, what's your cost per mile versus the others, it's completely meaningless because their network length of haul is going to be different, and it won't yield any comparative value. So if you're able to put a baseline on all the shipments and separate one company from that baseline, whether it's margins, whether it's rate trends or prices, you get a much better view of what those trends mean, because it's a sort of a unitless measure. So we're doing a lot to do that. And then we have a whole suite of products coming centered around market analytics.
Anything you can say right now? Or
no?
Okay. All right. I had to ask.
I'm not going to commit to anything. But in our roadmap, we've been somewhat open about it. Exact dates to be determined, right? It's a roadmap. But we have a lot of work focused on bringing out that sort of high-level strategic view of the market. Where am I relative to my peers on many dimensions? Filter things out as needed, and then get into sort of that. Okay, why does this matter? Right. People look at trends, they say it's not actionable. Well, it kind of is. If you're playing strategy, you can kind of think of where you are in the cycle, and that might alter the way you go to market. But we still want to get into that sort of root cause. At what level of granularity is the most important information? Where's the margin? Where's the performance? Who's winning quotes? Who's not? So it extends all the way down to the shipment level over time, down to individuals and customers and accounts and all that. So yeah, super excited about this year and what we have in store.
I'm looking forward to it as well, right? Because I think that, I don't want to sound like a pessimist out there, but I think there's a lot of brokers who are cheering for a market shift that don't actually comprehend what a carrier market looks like for them in their book of business. And, I've been trying to warn people since like October, you better start selling soon, because when the markets tighten up, when capacity dries up, because let's call it what it is. It's been easy for the last 4 years to cover
100%.
Freight. And you have time to work on this, but like, I don't think people should be, at least on the broker's side, the market shift is not going to benefit you unless you've been out there actively selling and prospecting religiously during this time when it has, because like that's literally, we've been going hard from a business development standpoint for the last like 18 months. It has been nonstop, 400 or 500 outreaches a week style thing. And there's just two of us to put it into context. And so we've been doing that. And it's like, we're just now starting to see, we're not adding anybody, but I want to talk to you. So it took 18 months to get to that point. Now, some of you might be a lot cooler than I am in the sales process, but that is just what I personally have gone through. So it's like, if you're in this position right now and say it doesn't shift this year the way that people are predicting, and it's early next year, like you need to start today. Start your prospecting, because I would hate to see the amount of businesses that are out there who have one or two key accounts that account for 90% of their revenue. Because if there's any shot in that or any drop in that's when you're going to start seeing layoffs and everything else. And I don't want to see that at all. And I want to put this out there. Like you got to pick up the phone. You got to start talking to people now, because it's going to happen and you're going to be in a tough position if it goes against you.
Yeah, I mean, that's an opportunity that we see as well, is sort of how to facilitate the knowledge of capability, because we do have such a large number of brokers. As we work towards the shipper markets, they're going to, everything will be separate. There'll be nothing shared between the companies. There's very strict reasons for that. But at the end of the day, solving the problem of, hey, my route guide's not performing, I'm losing loads. I need to know where the strengths are, where the capabilities are. Who should I know? Who's going to help me? I think working with shippers for as many years as I've had in transportation, running bids and TMS, the goal there is, as a broker, is to differentiate your value. If you got to jump through hoops for an account, your reputation's everything at the start. And so they're really going to test you and see what you're made of. And so once those relationships normalize and there's trust and transparency, then you can build into different parts of your network relative to those strengths. But there is that initial hurdle. Part of it's informational, part of it's performance. We hope to address all of that. Really help the industry.
I love it, man. Matt, thank you so much for joining me here this morning. I really appreciate it. That's going to be it for this morning, you guys. We'll be back tomorrow. I think it's going to be around 10:30. Again, we're live at the TIA conference. If you're in Phoenix, stop on by. If you're not a member of the TIA, join the TIA. Come out here, Technovations. Cassandra, get out of here. Give me your shirt really quick. Hi, how are you? We're live right now, FYI.
Guys.
Yeah.
Anybody who's not here, I'm so sorry. You're missing out.
I love it. We'll be back tomorrow, you guys. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys. And we'll be talking to you soon.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're still, it's